look of indescribable sorrow. She gestured and said an arcane word, and Lapino went flying into the abyss, screaming, "I'm telling your father!" Then she knelt down to cradle his head, and her paws felt very soft and warm. Okay, that was weird. He could have sworn he'd just died. Instead, he was on the Farfarer, sailing away from Ubar. And it was still burning. He'd fled burning Ubar years ago, hadn't he? And now he was back there. Had all those years fighting the Empire been nothing but a vision into the future? A useful vision if it was true. He'd learned something. Lapino was a traitor. Renato had suspected there was something wrong with the mad rabbit, but now he knew there was malice behind his goofiness. He'd made bad choices, but now, when the real battle came, he wouldn't make those choices. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. The book's pages began to flip backwards, towards the beginning, and he realized that his adventure was just beginning. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced, or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple, another ancient item that was only resurfacing now, drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? Renato distrusted doors that opened automatically, especially after being buried for millennia. Was this some sort of trap? He didn't even need to aim it. Ravens were already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. And he hadn't come too late. Boom! shocked his hook didn't break.
How did a temple to Iblis still even exist? The Transcendent Emperor had destroyed all the shrines of the lost gods after exiling them. Had it been buried in that long-ago battle? Or had Iblis foreseen his fate and hidden it from his enemy?
Ready to take on new powers.
The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders. He shouldn't get impatient. He needed to take the time to figure out what all his experience had brought him.
These platforms were great. Renato wanted one for his house. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and Renato wasn't sure he really wanted to be Emperor. Why not capture the core of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the Transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. The core, said the stone anxiously. The stone bothered him. He hated being told what to do. Wasn't that why he'd joined the rebellion? Wasn't that why he'd refused to be a soldier? He'd agreed to come on board only if he could freelance. The stone felt a bit clingy. The sage Calaveras had told him where to find the Sky Ripper, a weapon capable of challenging the gods, even without its armature.
the core would still possess great power.
The moment he landed the Farfarer, Reynardo had a rare feeling of regret. It's not too late, he thought. He could turn around and sail for Zenobia's island. He frowned. Wait a minute. He didn't want to kill Zenobia, did he? No! Sure, technically she was the enemy, but they'd been at Sword Fu school together. They'd never been lovers, but somehow they'd been closer. She'd told him every secret about herself. Except the biggest one, that she was the Emperor's daughter. No. Kill Zenobia, whispered the stone. Before it's too late. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time.
It was like having the world's heaviest bogey right by his side.
The stone hadn't lied about what it could do for him. With each raven he cut down, he felt a jolt of power flowing into his arm. "You're weak," whispered the stone. "The core will kill you." "Are you afraid of it?" "No, don't be ridiculous," it chuckled. But it's unstable. It will poison you if so much as carry it, and if you try to use it, it will explode catastrophically. Reynardo did not trust rocks that talked in his head. He went onwards.
Boy, with this device he could travel at night, so long as there are ravens to set on fire.
As he approached the core, the stone became hysterical. "No! It's too much power. We'll rip a hole in Spencer and time." He had a sudden vision of plunging his gauntlet into the core and dying in anguish. That wasn't his vision, was it? The stone had sent him its darkest fears, hadn't it? He had a sudden impulse to do exactly that. He raised his right fist and plunged it into the core. There was a rush of light. He thought he could hear the stone screaming. And then he passed out. When Reynardo came to, the core was gone. But the Iblis stone was no longer black, but glowing with a blue light. And it was silent. "I can't hear you," he sang out, and "You?" It didn't answer. "Ha!" he said. He had defeated the demonic gem with the power of his mind. He felt invincible. It was time to attack the Imperial outpost on the Nexus. Take the battle to the enemy. But among the huge crystals, there was also an observatory. A wise man would probably ask the scientists exactly what he had first. How wise was he? Farfarer sailed towards the Nexus. Renato wondered if the core had been created to silence the stone, or even to feed its hunger. Honestly, he didn't care. He felt terrific, and he appreciated the quiet inside his head.
The Nexus was infested with ravens, but that didn't bother Renato. With each death, the converted Iblis stone in his gauntlets glowed brighter, and he felt stronger.
Wow. He was getting a bit bloodthirsty, wasn't he?
Well, he wasn't worried. He was a warrior. They're supposed to be bloodthirsty.
This was the craziest weapon he'd ever used. Or not. I wonder what I could make with all these sword crafting materials, thought Renato. The core, absorbed in the stone, was doing its job perfectly. Renato could feel a little eldritch jolt every time he downed a raven, but then it flowed into the glowing stone the way water flows down a riverbed. It all felt perfectly natural, as if all his life, this was what he had been meant to do. There was an inscription, no spitting. Renato tore to the last remaining guards at the outpost like hot coffee through snow. There was a far speaker toad here. He called the council speaker. He knew she would be thrilled. And she was. She wanted him to come back to base. They had plans to discuss and a medal to give him. A large, golden medal. Great, said Renato. Let's talk about who else I can kill. Then the far speaker croaked again.
Hello, Renato, he said. If you get sick of slaughtering second-rate birds in the Nexus, I'm waiting for you in the mountains.
Zenobia, the witch, taunting him. With the stone, he'd finally be her match. Zenobia was taunting him. No doubt she hoped to lure him into a trap,
But it didn't matter, did it? He could fight his way out of any trap. He was invincible. This was gonna be fun. So where was this ambush? Renato couldn't wait. At Sword Fu school, she'd always studied a little harder, practiced a little longer, complained really a lot less. And then she'd become a sorceress. He'd always known he'd have to take her by surprise or not at all. But this would be a surprise indeed.
What else could you hook? A very clever engineer named Elon Muskrat got his start making floating platforms. Not many people knew that.
The mountain paths were infested with ravens. That was swell. Every time he cut one down, the stone glowed a little brighter.
In fact, everything glowed a little brighter. Look how white the snow was, and how very blue the raven blood was.
Seriously, where was she? He wanted to try his new strength against hers.
Burnt fur. Yes. Having a goblin for a pet. If they didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger. Renato felt antsy. He found a source of great power. But instead of joining with the rebels, he was on a fool's errand the Emperor's daughter had sent him on. The rebels were preparing a last-ditch attack against the Imperial fleet, counting on Renato to show up in time. Would he be too late?
At the end of the path was Zenobia. I thought you were going to ambush me, he said, a little put out. I owe you better than that. Well, what are we waiting for? That, she said, as a dropship poured a bucket of green liquid on his head. Drowsy gas. You can't stop me with drowsy gas, Zenobia. My power's too strong. Zenobia? Where was she?
When he awoke, he was staring up at the sky. Zenobia looked down at him, brooding.
I probably ought to kill you, but that'd be a bit tawdry, wouldn't it? She was tossing the glowing stone from paw to paw. This is pretty.
Zenobia!
He shouted, and then he fell back into sleep.
Renato woke up on the Farfarer. His head ached. He drank his favorite hangover remedy, but the brandy did no good.
Zenobia had beaten him again. Oh, he really should have listened to the Iblastone in the first place instead of messing around with the core. He had a bad feeling about the upcoming fight, but what kind of hero misses the final battle?
Renato was bruised and tired. He wasn't looking forward to killing ravens. It didn't even seem scary. It felt like a chore, like sweeping the practice room at Swordfu School, which he'd done his best to leave for Zenobia whenever he could. What would she do with the glowing Iblastone? That should terrify him, shouldn't it? But he just felt dull and stupid as he carved his way towards probable doom. A portal that led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. Of all the artisans he was creating employment for. Truly, he was a job creator. Gone rather well, actually.
It was all so unfair. He'd wanted to protect himself, protect the world from the Iblestone's hunger for blood and souls. And all he'd done is get mud. Next time he owned a supernatural artifact that wanted tribute, he'd serve it champagne and caviar.
What did you do with one of these platform stores? What were these poles exactly? Parking meters from the time of the lost gods?
Zenobia was cleaning blood off her sword and weeping. "It's so hungry. I can't stop killing," she said. "But I fed it the core of the Sky Ripper, and now it's hungry again." She wept. It was true. The Iblestone was black again, a void that seemed to suck all the light out of the sky. "Take it from me, Renato, while you still can." "Okay. I'll take it," he said. Yes, he thought. This is what it means to be a hero. To save the soul of even his old enemy when it looked like all was lost. He stepped forward to accept the sword from her outstretched hand. She flipped the sword, and the blade went into his gut. As the Iblestone sucked his soul into its infinite darkness, he could vaguely hear a voice, something like Zenobia's chuckle. "Sucker." Renato stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. But he'd learn another true thing. The Iblestone was evil. It would try to corrupt anyone who used it. But that meant
There must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and
the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced, or so a scholar in the mountains had told him. Surely the weapon that banished the lost gods could defeat the Emperor.
Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion. But could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens?
The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters.
The Iblis stone. It would whisper promises in his ear, offer him power for blood. But this time, Renato was sure he could master it.
And so, Renato went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Sky Ripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away.
Were all these things the Iblis stone? Long hidden in a buried temple? Another ancient item that was only resurfacing now? Drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals? What was he doing here? Last time, the stone had fought him for possession of his own soul. For some reason, Renato remembered a fairy tale his mother had told him about a land where only the apes talked and animals went around without clothes. Already here, cawing in frustration. They were still searching for a way in. Good. Then he hadn't come too late. What could he craft with the materials he had? Renato had a pretty good idea, actually. Don't look down, he thought. There had to be some way to use the Iblis stone. It was old, wasn't it? People are so much cleverer now. And Renato was pretty sure he was cleverer than most people.
Renato felt restless. Maybe he could focus all that energy into something useful.
The Ravens at least could not get past this point. Obviously, the temple builders knew how to deal with tomb raiders.
Good thing Renato didn't have vertigo. It was a stone of the purest blackness. It reflected no light, like a void made solid. Nervous, he picked it up. Who said that? It was the stone. Eager, thirsty. That seemed tempting and terribly wrong. Zenobia was the Emperor's greatest general and a potent witch. But they had been close once, and he had a sneaking suspicion the gem would try to control him. Why not? Or of Sky Ripper instead? It was the eye of a lost god torn out by the transcendent Emperor to power his greatest weapon. What's the call? Said the stone anxiously.